Welcome everybody to Fan for Racing Radio. We're happy to have you here today. And today, Jay and I are going to give you a preview of the upcoming races at Daytona, to include the Duels that are happening on Thursday and the Daytona 500 that will take place on Sunday. So welcome to the show, Jay. And I'm pretty excited. The season is getting underway.
That it is, and I'm excited because we're being able to do. I know we had a practice session this morning and got qualifying coming up tonight, and then the Duels tomorrow. And as we build our fan base, hope to hear more from y'all. But I'm excited about it, and I'm excited about racing. I got my godfather, Moody Motorsport.
Moody today.
Yeah, and then Six Flags. I got the Snowball Derby I went to. I got the hoodie on, so I'm ready for race season.
Very cool. I'm still in my generic stuff. We've got snowstorms here, so my comfort came first here.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to say, we're lucky we don't see you with a parka all huddled up.
Okay, so we're going to start with what's happening in the NASCAR world. The Duels are coming up on Thursday. And Jay, I tell you what, it's going to be Thursday night. And I'm definitely looking forward to the Duels, because this is what sets up the lineup for the Daytona 500.
You know, it is. It's one of those of the storylines are different. I used to get real excited for the Duels because it was about qualifying your way in. I know with the charter system, and I'm not going to go down that road completely right now. We'll save that for when we start doing a hot topic sessions and different things. But there's three things that are important about the Duels still. First of all, your front row, your pole and your outside pole of the charter teams will lock into those positions, front row. Second off, you still have the fastest two open teams will lock in based on their speed if necessary. And then you still, and this goes to the open teams now, want to be up towards the front, because if that one that has one of the top two fastest times races their way in the duel, then it goes back to the time next highest on the list for times. So come the Duels, you still have that storyline of which of the open teams are going to race their way in. I found it a lot more exciting when it used to be multiple teams racing their way in via the Duels. I get it. It's not the way it is anymore, so we got to adapt to it. But there is still that one storyline, at least one of the open cars will. And who it is, it depends on not just that finish, but if the qualified or fastest qualified one is, then it becomes the next one in the time trials. So there's still a great storyline to listen and watch to there. And then an additional one, we'll see how much we see this year, Sharon. I don't know if you've taken a real good look at this, but the OEP, Open Exemption Provisional. And what that is NASCAR has said it's a 40-car field. If a driver, and they have to 90 days prior put up for this, register for it to be given it. And this, for the Daytona 500, it's going to be the number 91 of Helio Castroneves. If he races, times his way in and locks in, good. If not, they will put a 41st spot and let him race. However, doesn't get paid. There is no money involved with it then. So then it is just a matter of you get to go out and race and show your talent. Your sponsor will be out there, but you don't get any money or points or anything else as far as payout.
So I'm assuming Helio's okay with that.
It's like I said, this is the first one we've seen of it. We'll see how much it happens throughout the year. Obviously, you want to race your way in and get paid, and it's open to, and I don't have the rules in front of me to know for sure, but a top motorsports driver from a Formula One, IndyCar, contributor to motorsports in general from something outside of NASCAR. I know when they first talked about this, there's a lot of talk about, can Jimmy Johnson use it because he's not full-time now? Can Martin Truex as being a part-time or once in a... No, it is from outside of NASCAR, motorsports contributor. So I think it's interesting. The not getting paid at all thing, That's still a big risk, but it's better than nothing, I guess, if you go and don't make it.
That's true. And speaking of the Daytona Duels, they start at 7 p.m. tomorrow night. That's Eastern time, and it will be televised on Fox Sports 1. So fans will want to definitely watch that, I'm sure. There was a practice earlier today. Their first practice was this morning. That was on FS1 at 10 a.m. Eastern time. And the qualifying, there's going to be some qualifying that will determine the lineup for the Daytona Duels. And that will be tonight at 8 p.m. And that also will be on FS1 as well as MRN and Sirius XM NASCAR radio. So that's the rest of today. This is what's going on with regard to the duels. So we don't know the lineup yet because that won't be determined until tonight. So if you want to know what the lineup for the duels is going to be, make sure you watch tonight at 8 p.m. Eastern, Jay.
That'll be interesting. But yeah, the duels will be broadcast tomorrow night. And I love my TV because I did not realize practice this morning was on TV, but it recorded it while I was gone. So I actually got that on over in the background right now. I can give you a couple of tidbits from that.
Perfect. So why don't you go ahead and do that?
Well, just when we start going through it, I know Brad Keselowski, Roush Fenway Keselowski teams are having a problem. Both him and Ryan Preece that I've seen so far having some right front smoke issues. I know they interviewed Brad Keselowski and it was a steering issue. So that's why in this practice, we talk about this of normally they don't have practice prior to the 500 like they used to, is so important because there's a couple of teams that were working out some issues, just bugs. First race of the year. It's an important one. It's our Super Bowl of racing. Yes. So I think it is huge. Kevin Harvick's been talking a lot about it, how happy he is that they're allowing him this practice session like this. The other one, Eric Jones had let's see what I wrote down here, a clutch issue. And then listening on Sirius XM radio this morning while I was out and about, Ross Chastain was having a radio issue, hearing his spotter and whatnot back and forth. He was having a radio issue. So those are things that you hate to see that at any race, but especially the first one of the year to start out the season.
Yes, especially to start out. But keep in mind that the duels, basically what the duels accomplish is figuring out who's going to be on the front row. The Xfinity Series will practice at 4:30 p.m. Eastern. That's on the CW network. Keep in mind, everything Xfinity this year is on the CW network. And then the NASCAR Cup Series Practice 2 will be on Friday. And that will be at 5:30 p.m. Eastern on FS1, MRN, and Sirius XM NASCAR radio. Just to provide a little bit of clarification to the schedule I gave you earlier, on Thursday, I said it was the Cup Series practice that would take place at 5 p.m. on Fox Sports 1. That's actually the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series that will practice at 5 p.m. on Thursday. And that's just before the duels at Daytona on Fox Sports 1, MRN, and Sirius XM at 7 p.m. Eastern. Then on Friday, just to continue with what the schedule is, Friday, the Craftsman Truck Series will have their qualifying session on FS1 at 3 p.m. Xfinity will have a practice session on the CW network. But keep in mind, this year, everything Xfinity is going to be on the CW network. So that starts at 4:30 p.m. The Cup Series Practice 2 will be on Fox Sports 1 and MRN and Sirius XM at 5:30 p.m. on Friday. And then the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series race is on Fox Sports 1, MRN, and Sirius XM at 7:30 p.m. on Friday. The ARCA race, by the way, is going to be on Fox, MRN, and Sirius XM. That starts at 12 noon Eastern time. And the Cup Series final practice will be on FS2, MRN, and Sirius XM NASCAR Radio at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. The Xfinity Series race starts at 5 p.m., again on the CW Network, MRN, and SiriusXM. Sunday, we've just got the Daytona 500, and that is on Fox Deportes, and MRN, SiriusXM, starting at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Time. So that pretty much gives you the schedule for the entire weekend.
Well, and we said we wanted to get back into racing, and they're providing it. That's a lot. I love Daytona weekend.
That's a lot of racing. I'm going to try something here, Jay. I'm going to see if I can put that up.
Okay.
On the screen.
Oh, yeah. You said you were going to see if you could post that.
Yeah. Let me pull it up here again. Okay.
And as you're working on that, we'll talk a little bit here about practice from this opening practice. If you pull it up just by checking on it, it was a 50-minute practice. I'll start with who was out there. There were 46 drivers. You got the 36 chartered teams as well as 9 open teams. So a total of 45. They are fighting for 40 spots. The 9 open teams essentially battling for 4 spots, with the exception, again, if that 5th spot is taken by Helio Castroneves, again, the only one eligible for that. Run through the open team. I was going to run through the open teams.
Okay, go ahead.
The number 01, Corey LaJoy. The number 40, Junior Motorsports, is Justin Algar. JJ Yaley. And the number 44, number 56, is Martin Truex Jr. The number 62 is Anthony Alfredo. The 66, that'll be Chandler Smith. And then we got the 78 of BJ McLeod. The 84 is Jimmy Johnson. And then that number 91 is Helio Castroneves. So again, those are the open teams that are really going to be fighting for a spot hard.
Yes, they are. Yes, they are. Okay, I cannot share my screen. I wish I could, but I will post it on fanforracing.com so that everybody can use that as a resource for knowing where to watch what at what time. Okay.
All right, nice. Say, I've been watching the practice now, and I knew this for if you have any new casual race fans. This practice, it's great to watch if you're a race fan, a pure race fan. I like watching anything, but it doesn't, how do I say this? Don't put a lot of impact of it as it pertains to the duel or the race of the Daytona 500. There are so many agendas of some guys just trying to shake down their car. Some of them are focused on top speed because they want to lock in via qualifying and be one of those 2 locked in teams. Others are drafting. And when you look at the top 5 as it shows of top speed, they were Toyotas. And I know they were out there doing a drafting session. I don't know if they were the only group that did, but that reflects in the speed. Throughout most of the session, as I'm listening here from the recording, Kyle Busch was the fastest of single car for most of the session. And I think he ended up 10th on the list overall. So again, you got to keep all that in mind. And they're practicing in the day. Qualifying is at night and the duels are at night. So like I said, you can't take it as 100%. This is how it's going to look.
Not only that, but I think sometimes drivers don't want to give away everything they've got. So they kind of play low key during a practice to save most of their resources for the actual racing.
And that was one, William Byron. They interviewed him right away. I think he did 2 laps. The car was running and not having any issues, and he came back in and he was done. He didn't even go out any more laps. So, like I said, a lot of different agendas.
Exactly. Okay, so I think we've got everybody on track for what happened in the practice session. Let's go ahead and go through our notes. And highlight some of the things that fans should keep an eye on for this race that's coming up, the Daytona 500. And I'm going to kind of split my screen here, if you will, so that I can have 2 screens up at the same time. Before we get into anything, though, Jay, let's talk about Helio Castroneves. Helio is doing this for the first time. He actually becomes the oldest driver to make a Cup Series debut at the Daytona 500. His actual age is 49 years, 9 months, and he's breaking a record by contending for the Daytona 500. The record that was previously held by Joe Mihalik at 47 years, 3 months, and that was set in 1974. So that's how old that record has stood. And so here comes Helio, and I think it's going to be fun to watch.
It is. And here again, and Sharon and I were talking about this before we even started the show. No matter what happens, what decisions made, you're going to have fans that like it, fans that don't like it. And I get that and respect that. Now, again, if you want to share comments, please do, but be respectful. Again, if you're not in favor of it, get that. You're more than welcome to express that. Just be respectful about it. I'm in favor of it. You know, Sharon, you and I both kind of share that opinion. The crossover we've seen, whether it be Kyle Larson running the Indy 500, Helio coming over, this whole extra provisional thing, I wasn't a big fan of, but I understand why NASCAR is doing it. Again, they're saying, okay, we'll bring it in. If you can't race your way in and qualify based on speed, you get the provisional, but it's not going to pay out. So they said, hey, you know, we're not just going to give you a spot per se. So I appreciate the fact that they did it that way. I think it benefits racing, and I'm all for that. I'm not a big IndyCar fan personally, but, you know, I watched when Kyle Larson did it. Engaging other fans like that, I think, is huge. So I think there is great benefit to it.
I agree, Jay. You know, cross promotion, I don't think anybody loses when you cross promote that way. We've done it with IndyCar when Kyle Larson went and raced over there. Now Helio's coming here. I think it's a win-win, no matter what. That's my view of it. Also, he's a 4-time Indianapolis 500 winner from 2001, 2, 9, and 21. And will be the 16th Indy 500 winner to start a Daytona 500 and the 9th to do so after first winning at Indianapolis. So some cool stats there about Helio Castroneves.
And when you look at all his stats go in real quick here as a continuing where Sharon's at, 3-time Rolex 24 at Daytona overall winner in 21, 22, and 23. He's a 2020 IMSA WeatherTech Sports Car DPI champion, 31 career IndyCar victories, which is 10th most all time and most for a non-champion. He's got 394 career IndyCar starts, which is 3rd most any time of all time. 4-time runner-up in that championship, unfortunately. One of those stats you don't necessarily want to have, but, you know, 208, 13, and 14. So when you talk about that, having that kind of credentials as far as contributing to motorsports, why not let them be a part of the Daytona 500 specifically, but just throughout the year? Again, this is the first one. It's happening here at Daytona, so we're talking about it. I think we'll see it with some of the road courses, I think, is where you're going to primarily see it throughout the rest of the season.
Yes, indeed. But one thing that I think fans should remember, too, is that Helio does have 4 career Daytona Oval starts in the IROC competition. His best finish with IROC was a 6th place finish in 2004. So he's raced on this oval before, just not in a NASCAR stock car.
Yeah, and that's going back into history. I have vague memories of the IROC series of a little bit. I know some fans want to see that come back. Not sure. I did, and I appreciate it. But again, in this day and age, especially with you talking about sponsorship money, which is kind of why it went away to begin with, just wasn't profitable. So again, I hate it, but I understand it at the same side because I can't afford to pay the bill.
I hear you. And I remember watching Dancing with Stars, too, in 2007, when he was the 5th season winner of Dancing with the Stars. And I loved the outfits he wore. I just thought he was a winner there as well. Obviously, winning the entire season. He was pretty quick on his feet.
That is one of those where you talk about this crossover, whether it be in racing or other things, to try and draw the interest. That one did not hook me. And I think about even going back to Jeff Gordon doing Saturday Night Live. I was a Jeff Gordon fan. I watched a little bit of it, but it did not draw me in enough to watch the entire show. It didn't work on me anyway, but it does at least engage fans. And I appreciate drivers doing outside stuff like that, because it does as a whole obviously help promote the sport and bring fans to the sport, and vice versa. Dancing with the Stars was not one of them that brought me into that.
Oh, I had fun with it. I enjoyed it. Okay, let's talk about the actual Daytona 500. We already told you it's going to start at 2:30 on Sunday, February the 16th, at Daytona International Speedway. It's a 2.5-mile asphalt oval. Boy, the purse for this race is up there, $30,331,250. So pretty heavy purse there. It will be on Fox starting at 2 p.m. With pre-race coverage. You can also listen in on MRN and Sirius XM NASCAR Radio on channel 90. Of course, it will be 500 miles over 200 laps. Stage 1 will end on lap 65. Stage 2 will end on lap 130. And then the final stage ends on the last lap, which is lap 200. So we've got quite a few storylines to hit on here with regard to the upcoming 500.
Well, and if you're a history fan when it comes to NASCAR for 2025, it's the 77th year of NASCAR Cup Series racing, but only 67th year of the Daytona 500 itself. I found that interesting. I didn't realize it was a 10-year gap from when they started NASCAR to actually running what they call it now as the Daytona 500. So I found that interesting.
I found that interesting too, but I remember hearing stories about Bill France Sr. getting on tractors and heavy equipment and helping build Daytona International Speedway. So in some respects, that doesn't surprise me, because the France family literally helped build that track.
And that's true. I know I've watched a couple of the history on that of the meeting they had, and I can't think of the name of the hotel there in Daytona Beach, of creating NASCAR. We've seen some different applications to that. They did it as a comic strip on one of them, but also some others. To really understand the history of that is always fun to go back and watch and learn about.
Yes, it is. Now, Hendrick Motorsports has won 16 poles. That's 10 more than any other organization. They won the pole in the 8 of the last 10 Daytona 500s. So I would say they're a team to watch this weekend. They didn't win the pole last year, but they did win the race last year. So maybe they don't want to win the pole. They'd rather win the race.
And I was thinking about that, and that's why I said you can't really go by what was on the practice sheet from this morning, because as I looked at that, I was obviously looking for Hendrick Motorsports and where they were at. That doesn't always tell the whole story. Hendrick has been very good as far as bringing the powerhouse engines down there and sitting on the pole, and we saw some records with that, and we'll get a little more about Alex Bowman as we go further down. But the Toyotas generally don't qualify well, but run well during the race. So that factors in, as I mentioned. I know they were one group that did run as far as the drafting, running as a group. So all these things factor into one great outcome when it comes to winning the Daytona 500. That's the ultimate goal.
Now, we mentioned that Hendrick Motorsports won the race, although they didn't make the pole in 2024. That was when William Byron won just last year. But Dale Earnhardt did the same thing, didn't win the pole, but won the race in 2014. So they've done it twice. Will they do it again this year?
Yeah, I know. I figure we'll talk about that maybe kind of towards the end of who we think is going to come out. But when you look statistically wise, the pole winner, no matter what team they're from, has finished 14th or worse in 9 of the last 10 Daytona 500s and failed to finish due to accidents in 4 of the last 6. Here's one of the Alex Bowman stats. He finished 5th from the pole in 2023, and that's the only pole winner to finish top 5 in the last 23 races.
Yay,
So
Alex Bowman.
there's a lot of prestige and honor that goes with having the fastest car and sitting on the pole, but does it equate then to lifting that trophy at the end of the Daytona 500, which is what they really want?
I think if you give drivers a choice, Jay, they're going to choose winning the race over taking the pole. Okay, Alex Bowman has 3 Daytona 500 poles, though. The record is 4 by Billy Elliott. Billy Elliott. I don't think I've ever called him that, but I did just now. Buddy Baker and Cale Yarborough also have 3 Daytona 500s, and 4 Daytona poles. I'm wondering if Alex Bowman can pull off a 4th and join that elite group this weekend.
I really think it'd be Chase Elliott. If I had to go with from Hendrick Motorsports, I kind of see it as Chase Elliott. I almost wanted to say Kyle Larson, being that he is a throttle down all times kind of driver, but that can also get you in trouble at a track like Daytona. Because if you're not lifting off and you bobble just that little bit by being too aggressive, you may not wipe out, but that little bobble will cost you, because we've seen it of time-wise. You're talking split seconds between times. That I think Kyle Larson, the fact that he's hard on the throttle, wide open all the time, could be a detrimental to that in as far as getting the pole and being a smooth lap.
Yeah, well, I think Alex Bowman gets a bad rap sometimes from some of the fans. So I'm going to be an Alex Bowman fan this weekend. I'm going to root for him taking that pole and getting another top 5 finish in the Daytona 500.
Talking about that pole still, Joey Logano winning the pole for last year's event, the 2024 Daytona 500, ended an 11-year streak of Chevrolet poles in the Daytona 500. It was Team Penske's first Daytona 500 pole. And I know there's been a lot of talk about that. Penske Motorsports, across multiple motorsports platforms, has been the team to beat here lately. They got Joey Logano as the defending champion, Ryan Blaney from the year before. A lot of talk of whether or not that carries over into this year's Daytona 500. So keep an eye on the Penske Fords.
Yes, a lot of people think that Team Penske has kind of surpassed Hendrick Motorsports in some ways, but I think if Hendrick Motorsports has anything to say about it, they want to bounce back very quickly. We'll see what happens. All right, the Daytona 500 winner started 10th or worse in 6 of the last 7 races. So how about that stat? Maybe winning the pole isn't where you want to be. You want to be 10th or worse and end up winning it.
Yeah, another interesting one. I knew that obviously the pole sitter wasn't necessarily the odds-on favorite when it comes to the 500, but the fact that they've started 10th or worse was a little surprising to me. Yes and no, because we also know that in the closing laps, especially, a whole lot of shuffling going on. It's a matter of being in the right line at the right time and making the right move at the right time to get that run, and having somebody behind you to push you. So
exactly.
It's going to be interesting.
You don't want to make enemies at the Daytona 500. You want as many friends as you can find on the track. And it's going to be interesting this year to see how that works out, Jay, when you think about it, because NASCAR has implemented some rules this year that will penalize manufacturers now for manipulating races. So that's kind of interesting. I'm wondering if you see that this year.
But when it comes to super speedway racing, and they talked about this already on Sirius XM when that was announced, a manufacturer pushing with, because again, we know that at speedway, super speedway races, the drafting style tracks, you got to have somebody to push. That is working as a team. It's a manufacturer team. The manipulation is more so of if you're trying to prevent or determine the outcome of somebody else. I'm trying to think how they worded it, but here you're at least
as a team. I agree. Daytona, working together as a team and drafting together, That's one
Right.
thing. But it's when you're preventing other drivers from advancing as a group, then that's
And
not a good thing.
I think that was kind of where the language was. If you're drafting, you're still working on your best finish, not giving up your finish to try and prevent or determine somebody else's. So that's where, and I understand it's a fine line, and that question obviously came up, and I understand fans asking it. But there it really is as far as a benefit for everybody on your team, whether, again, it be Penske or Ford as a manufacturer team, but it's not to go out and prevent or hurt somebody else's is the big key factor. And I think
Yeah.
these teams know it. I mean, and this goes back to obviously Martinsville last year, and we'll talk about that some other time, I'm sure, as these rule issues come up. But, there it was a clear matter of, well, we're going to make sure somebody else doesn't finish where they need to.
Right, right. So, something to watch for. I don't think it happens so much at the beginning of the year as it does at the end of the year, but it is something to keep your eye on throughout the year. Okay, Ty Gibbs, Carson Hocevar, Chandler Smith, and Todd Gilliland were not born the last time the Daytona 500 pole winner won the race, and that was Dale Jarrett. Do you know how long ago that was, Jay?
I didn't until I read it. I'm looking at the notes you are, and I would not have been able to pull that one out, even if it had been multiple choice. Going all the way back to 2000 with Dale Jarrett. I know, like I said, it's not a great place as far as being the 500 winner, your pole sitter, but I did not realize it'd been, 20, this will be 25 years. That was a little surprising to me, yeah.
Okay. Also, Michael McDowell won the pole for the last 5 races at drafting tracks. That's the most since Bill Elliott's 6 straight from 1985 through 86. The record is 7, and that was set by Cale Yarborough. For the last 5 races at drafting packs, Michael McDowell is good on these drafting tracks.
And that's one of those of what you call the great, I want to say underdog story. Some people may not see it as an underdog story, but Front Row Motorsports, Michael McDowell, are not a top tier team. I mean, that's a fact. And I think that team would tell you that themselves. They know that they're not one of the top tier Hendrick or Penske teams. So to go out and do that, of taking that step to becoming recognized as one of the top teams, certainly. And I was so happy for Michael McDowell, one of those that doesn't, he always said, the only thing he was known for was his crash in Texas with Michael Waltrip racing in the Aaron's machine. He said, at least he's now getting talked about and recognized for something other than that crash.
Yes, that is a good thing. Another stat here for fans to be aware of, Ford won the pole for the last 9 races at drafting tracks. So we mentioned the dominance that Hendrick Motorsports has at Daytona. It'll be interesting. We mentioned that Joey Logano won in the pole last year. So will it be a Ford or a Chevrolet, or will Toyota jump up there?
And that's where it comes in really odd to say Toyota as an underdog. But if you're talking about the pole, especially at Daytona, yeah, Toyota is the underdog. So you were talking about being an Alex Bowman fan. I'd kind of like to see one of the Toyotas do it and pull off the pole and break up all these records we're talking about. Hendrick Motorsports, Chevrolet, Ford now being in there with the last several. So, yeah, I'd kind of like to see Toyota break all that up.
Yeah, that would be interesting. And it could happen. We'll have to watch and see. Only 3 of the last 10 Daytona 500s had at least 44 drivers on the entry list, with only 1 of 10 having more than 44. And that was 49 drivers in 2015. But I think we've got quite a few that are competing this year.
Yeah, with 45, and I heard him talking about that. That's one of those of, I have my thoughts and reasons as to why we don't see that anymore. I know the charter system comes into play. I'm hoping we're going back in a direction of we see that. Not that I want to see somebody get sent home, but I think it adds more to the drama of the race itself and the season.
Yes.
let me rant a little bit. Just a little bit. All right, give me a little bit of time. No,
Get up on that soapbox, Jay.
yeah. Well, being with local dirt tracks, that's what it is. I mean, you are one of the fastest. If you're not, you come back and try again next week. So I think, for the fans' perspective, if their favorite driver, and if you go to the track and you're looking to see Jeff Gordon race, and I use him because, like I said, that was my favorite driver as I got into NASCAR. Yeah, I'm disappointed and not see him at the track. But guess what? I'm going to follow the rest of the races to see if he makes up those points. And I always go back to 2015 when Kyle Busch got hurt and missed 11 races. I think Kyle Busch gained more fans in that season by winning that championship and overcoming. He gave him an 11 race head start and he still beat him. I think that just added it to his legacy, but I think it gained fans looking to see if he could do it. All right, I'll put the box away. I put the soapbox down. I'll sit back down now.
That's quite all right. Okay, now 8 of the last 10 Daytona 500s were won by drivers getting their first Daytona 500 win. And actually, there's 9 drivers that posted their first career NASCAR Cup Series victory with a win in the Daytona 500. And let's talk about those because it goes all the way back to 1963. You had Tiny Lund in 63, Mario Andretti in 67, Pete Hamilton in 1970, Derek Cope in 1990, Sterling Marlin in 94, Michael Waltrip in 2001, Trevor Bayne in 2011, Michael McDowell in 2021, and in 2022, it was Austin Cindric. So let's talk about first-time winners.
That is one of the great things. I know we talk about this being the Super Bowl of NASCAR, and that's one of the trophies. Like I said, all drivers. Look at Dale Earnhardt, chased it for 19 years, I believe. Darrell Waltrip, 17 years, that they all want to win, and it's that hard. So when you talk about a driver getting their first win or only win in some cases, but that's part of that. And at the time, it was known as restrictor plate, now super speedway racing, essentially the same, a drafting style track. You have the possibility of that great storyline. And I'm going to start with Derek Cope. The three of the 63, 67, and 70, a little before my time. Derek Cope's was a little bit different because that was one of the years Earnhardt had an issue. I believe that was the year he had a tire go down, or if that was the year he hit the bird. I don't remember which. But to see somebody get
Waltrip?
No, Derek Cope in 1990.
Okay.
Yeah, because he was behind Earnhardt. And then you had Sterling Marlin in 94, Michael Waltrip in 2001, unfortunately, with that whole scenario. But just to see these guys, Trevor Bayne, Michael McDowell, and Austin Cindric, to get that win, and that is a possibility. Again, I think that's why the Daytona 500 especially, being as big a race and you get as many people coming in to try and make that race, but any super speedway, you always have that possibility of the underdog or underfunded team, a dark horse pick of winning that race. Again, I find that extremely exciting.
It is exciting. And, when you think about that being their first career win on racing's biggest stage, or one of the biggest stages, the Daytona 500, it doesn't get anything better than that. But there are 2 drivers who won their first race in the Daytona 500. So meaning they've never raced the Daytona 500. And the first time they raced it, they won it. Do you want to talk about who those 2 drivers are?
Yeah, the first one is obviously the inaugural Daytona 500. The first time you have anything, somebody's going to be the only one to have done it. But it was a great champion in Lee Petty. The other one being Trevor Bayne. And there again, I think that's one of those remarkable things that at this point hasn't been duplicated again since 2011, that you may not see a whole lot of, although it could be Helio Castroneves could be one to do it this year. So I like that possibility. And it's not a super long shot. I know that statistically, a sports betting might still put it as a super long shot, but it's really not. You look at some of the drivers that won at any super speedway. Harrison Burton last year at Daytona, to make it into the playoffs. It's not all that uncommon anymore.
No, it's not. So we'll see what happens. But keep that in mind that only 2 drivers have ever done that in their very first race. All right, let's see. Repeat winners. Denny Hamlin is the only repeat winner in the last 15 Daytona 500s. He won 3 of the last 9 Daytona 500s. Denny Hamlin starts 25 with a new crew chief. He's got Chris Gale at the top of his pit box this year. And 2 of Hamlin's 3 Daytona 500 wins came after an off-season crew chief change. So that's happening this year. Could that be a good omen for Denny Hamlin? His best Daytona 500 finish in the next gen car, though, is 17th, and that was in 2023. So the next gen car doesn't seem to bode in his favor, but having a new crew chief might make a difference.
And there's a couple of different conversations you can have about this, of the next gen car being one of them. Some of these older drivers are having some issues with it. Kyle Busch, Jimmy Johnson, Denny Hamlin, when it comes to at least the super speedways. But you got to give Hamlin a shout out. When you talk about some of the drivers, it's not, how do I say this? Again, there are things outside your control. We know that when it comes to super speedway racing, but there are some drivers that still excel at it. Dale Earnhardt Jr., Michael Waltrip, Brad Keselowski, and Denny Hamlin obviously have shown the stats there. 3 of his wins came in that off season, or the changeover, and won 3 of the last 9. I mean, there was a stretch where he was the man to beat when it came to the super speedway racing. Yes, there's luck involved, and you got to be in the right time and right place, but you also create your own luck, and he obviously showed he could do so.
And I'm sure he wants to get off to a good start this season. Now, looking at the last 7 of the last 10 races were won by 2 manufacturers, but Chevrolet has won the last 2 Daytona 500s. Ford has 4 of those wins in the last 10 years, and Toyota has 3. So I think that is pretty evenly distributed for the most part. So who do you think is going to be favored for this season?
This is one of those where in one aspect I start thinking about it and I got something in my mind, and then we read something like this and I'm like, well, maybe it needs to, I need to go a different direction. Like you said, it is pretty even. Chevrolet having won the last 2. I really think Toyota, though, as far as running consistently in the race. However, Ford seems to be able to not manipulate, but work together at the end and be in the right position in a pack of Fords and get a Ford to victory lane. So, but then your other argument, Chevrolet won the last 2. So I think it's wide open. And I think that's what's great about NASCAR right now with this next gen car. I know we talked about some of the drivers, older drivers are favorites if you've been a fan for a while, struggling to get their hands around it and how to work it into the way they want to drive versus how they need to drive it, adapting to it. But overall, and I know the charter system is helping with that, I will give it credit to that, of helping bring the entire field closer together so you don't see a big gap from the haves to the have-nots. I think we've seen that close up a lot, and I do like that, that it is that much more competitive.
All right. A Chevrolet driver, however, has not led the most laps in the Daytona 500 race since 2015. The last Chevrolet driver to lead the most laps in the Daytona 500 was Jeff Gordon in that same year, 2015. What are your thoughts there? That's kind of a little bit shocking to me.
That one certainly was a big shock. I would have put him as leading the most laps, not getting the victories necessarily, because we saw where Ford went through a streak of dominating that, and then Toyota with Denny Hamlin. But to not be leading laps really surprised me, because again, they start strong. Again, talked about Hendrick Motorsports, took pride in putting the pole sitter out there, at least starting up front, but then not being delivered when it came to the race victories. The one thing I know over the several years of that was that by having that much speed, and I talked about this with Kyle Larson then, being full throttle, the cars were a little bit loose and we're getting away from them. And I think that's why we see that. They got loose, they had to get out of it, they get freight trained and or wrecked out completely.
Yeah, it really is amazing. And I know some drivers, Truex was one of those drivers that never won a Daytona 500. So it's a little frustrating from that perspective sometimes. Okay, now there's 5 reigning NASCAR Cup Series champions that have gone on to win the Daytona 500 this season after winning the championship. So Lee Petty did it in 1959, Richard Petty in 73. So there's 2 Pettys to start off that list. Cale Yarborough in 1977. I'm seeing a trend here. Jeff Gordon in 1999 and Dale Jarrett in 2000. So it's kind of interesting that the champion has a tough time of coming back and winning the Daytona 500 the following year.
Well, and it's one of those things that stats like this are always fun to look at and try and predict based off of that, but there really isn't a whole lot of stock in them, as I mentioned, for multiple reasons. This one is an interesting stat when you think about it, but it is also the Daytona 500, not to say teams are discrediting anything else. They kind of separate it from the season. You want to get points. You want to have a good start to your season. But the Daytona 500 is the Daytona 500. You know, I mean, that in itself can make your career. Talk about Trevor Bayne having gotten that victory. You know, it really, that stays with you. You are a Daytona 500 champion, talked about for the rest of your life. So they kind of put that in a separate, hey, we're going to the Daytona 500, then we go racing for the season. Yeah, we got points for it, and it helps. Always good. You don't want to start in the hole if you wreck out. But it really is its own separate entity as part of the season.
Well, I'm going to add something here, though. I think if anybody could do it, I would put my money on Joey Logano. He won the champion this past year. I could see him coming in to the Daytona 500 and winning this 500.
He certainly has. He has won that from what I've
list.
Right. And from what I've observed, I wouldn't say I would rank him as a top super speedway racer. I think he is one of those that is a lot of times near the front because I think he's a great pusher and teammate as far as working together. Then it's a matter of, are you the car out in front when the checkered flag flies? So I think that would be the factor. I definitely see him being involved up front because, like I said, I think he does really well with drafting and helping his line or his team, however they're going about it, and being a good racer within the draft, being the one out front when it's time. That's a little bit different story.
All right. Well, here's another stat for you. There's been 3 times that the Daytona 500 winner has made it to the championship 4 in the elimination style playoffs. William Byron did it just last year. Denny Hamlin was able to do it in 2019 and 20. We'll have to see. There was a time when people thought that if you won the Daytona 500, your year was pretty much over. You didn't have much luck the rest of the season. But those 2 drivers made successful years out of it.
Well, and it's a big thing because in this format, you mentioned the elimination style playoffs, that win automatically does lock you into the playoffs. So the rest of the season, you're not necessarily worried about getting locked in. You're building on what playoff points you can build up, as well as start focusing a little bit already. As soon as you get that win, no matter what part of the season, once you get that win, you know you can start focusing a little bit more on the playoffs because you know you're locked in. So there is an advantage to that. And that one is a stat line I think is applicable to this day and age.
Yes, it is. And when you think about only 2 drivers have done it, beginning in 2019, 20, and then again in 24. So it's easy to get it. Once you win the Daytona 500, you know you're in the playoffs. But the key there is making it to the Final Four to contend for the championship.
Well, and that goes back to the previous of, yeah, if you win, you're in the playoffs. But if you're the dark horse or underdog, yeah, you're in the playoffs. But you're right. You pointed out William Byron, Denny Hamlin, perennial contenders for the championship, not just a race winner here or there throughout your year, but multi-time winner. I believe William Byron was tied at the top as far as sixth last year with Kyle Larson. So that is a factor then of whether or not it is a dark horse win versus a top tier team and that win that define that stat.
Okay, now there's two organizations that are within 43 laps of each other in the most laps led by an organization. That's Hendrick Motorsports and Joe Gibbs Racing, just for the Daytona 500. Joe Gibbs Racing right now is the all-time leader in that category with 1,387 laps led, and Hendrick comes in second at 1,344. So Hendrick and Gibbs are within that 43 laps of each other. Can Hendrick surpass Joe Gibbs Racing this year?
Yeah, that'll be interesting, especially now of hearing of how little Chevrolet leads out front. So that's kind of interesting. And this next stat line, I would have thought would have been more, but it's only been 3 times that the Daytona 500 winner has led only the final lap, all 3 coming in the last 8 races. Michael McDowell in 2021, Kurt Busch in 2017, and Austin Dillon in 2018. I would have had that up a little bit higher because we've seen that last lap pass. I guess going back to other Daytona or super speedway races, maybe I'm not thinking specifically the 500, but I would have put that number as a lot higher if I'd have been guessing.
Yeah, we love the last lap pass for the win, but to think that it's only happened 3 times in the Daytona 500 is a little bit surprising. It says led only the final lap. All 3 came in the last 8 races. So that says something. That's a very recent stat that has happened, which is kind of surprising in that respect as well, is that it's just in the last 8 years that we've seen that happen. So that's kind of interesting.
Well, and going in this one, it makes sense to me too then and what made me believe that number would have been more, says the eventual winner didn't lead for the first time until lap 157 or later in 7 of the last 8 Daytona 500s. 4 of those last 8 didn't even lead for the first time until lap 200 or later. And that, if you didn't catch that, means overtime, yes. A restart in overtime. They didn't even lead until after the race should have been over.
Exactly. That's the Daytona 500 is 200 laps. So yeah, if it's 200 or later, you know that we're talking overtime, that they are leading for the first time. So that's kind of interesting as well. And again, just in the last 8 years that's happened. Pretty amazing. Dale Earnhardt holds the record for the most starts before getting a Daytona 500 win. And people will remember when he finally did win, how every crew member was on pit road to congratulate him. Winning in his 20th start is when Dale Earnhardt, after 20 tries, finally made the Daytona 500 win. Martin Truex now is going to make his 21st start, and Kyle Busch is making his 20th Daytona 500 start, 21st year after missing the 25 500 due to an injury. Both are winless. Now, Dave Marcis holds the record for the most Daytona 500 starts without a win, and that sits at 33. So 2 drivers to watch this year to see if they can pull off that win after 21 years for Martin Truex Jr. and 20 years for Kyle Busch.
Well, and add it. Yeah, add in this of Kyle Busch leads all drivers with laps led among drivers that are winless in the Daytona 500 at 342. He is one of those drivers of kind of like Dale Earnhardt, Tony Stewart, you just eventually you think they're gonna win it. They found every way to lose it and not win it, unfortunately. This could be Kyle's year. I know he needs it after going winless completely last year. We talked about Denny Hamlin having some issues like that.
Yes.
This could be Kyle Busch's year when it comes to that.
Yes. By the way, RCR is very good on the super speedways. When you think about Dale Earnhardt was from RCR, Austin Dillon has won the Daytona 500. So I think that leans in Kyle Busch's favor for sure. Only once has a stage winner in the Daytona 500 gone on to win the race, and that was Denny Hamlin in 2020 after he won stage 2. So that's kind of a surprising stat that a stage winner has only won once.
Well, and this one too, it used to be a bigger thing because they had, man, Sharon helped me out. Sunoco, who put up the halfway money that they used to do?
Oh, I don't remember.
Oh man, I'm trying. I want to say it was Sunoco, but yeah, the leader at halfway has only gone on to win the Daytona 500 twice, and that was in '92, since 1992. Sorry, and that was Denny Hamlin as well, 2016 and 2020. That's a big part of super speedway racing. Of you want to try and stay out of trouble, and I know some drivers have taken to the motto of hang at the back and avoid it. That doesn't always work. Be out front, be in front of it. That doesn't always work either. So that, but those
back, I'm just not.
Yeah, I know. You go ahead and get on your soapbox. I know several drivers did it, and I understand that.
Yeah, Jimmy Johnson used to be famous for that, of kind of racing in the back and showing up at the end. And I like Jimmy Johnson, so I just don't like that strategy. I think that fans, when they pay the kind of money that they pay for seeing their driver race, they don't want to watch him race at the back of the pack for 500 laps or, for a 200 lap race, 500 miles. So I'm just not a fan of hanging at the back and showing up at the end. You're right. It doesn't always work out. It didn't work out for Denny Hamlin last year when he tried to do it to get into the, to be there for the Final Four. He was there for the Final Four, but he got caught up in a lot of, actually, he wasn't there for the Final Four.
No, because he started the round at Atlanta trying to do that and kind of put himself in a hole and didn't make it up at Bristol like he thought he would.
Yeah, exactly. So, those are the things that can go wrong when you race at the back of the pack. I like it when a driver's out there to race the race, and to be up front. I think you have a lot better chance of avoiding the accidents if you're up front than you do being at the back.
Well, and that, I would have backed that, except as we read, only a stage winner has only won the Daytona 500 once, and that was Denny Hamlin. But it also did, being that points are awarded, I think NASCAR did hear that from the fans, yes, like you, Sharon. And I think it was Dale Jarrett that kind of gets credited with the starting that of, hey, let's try this mentality of ride at the back. I think that was in his latter years that he was trying to do that there at Talladega as well. And it was a hit or miss. I mean, sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't.
Okay. Now, the 2023 Daytona 500 went 530 miles instead of 500 miles because there were 2 attempts at an overtime. It was the longest Daytona 500 in history. So we usually go unlimited attempts until we get somebody who can have a green finish. So that's kind of interesting. 530 miles.
Now, another interesting one, especially being that it's a Toyota, Christopher Bell became the first driver to finish inside the top 3 consecutively in the Daytona 500 without winning since Dale Earnhardt Jr. He was in the top 3 in 2012 and 13, but then won it in 2014. Christopher Bell is not one of those I'd have had on my list as far as top super speedway racers consistently, and this shows he is when it comes to the Daytona 500 anyway.
It does indeed. And I keep my eye on Christopher Bell because he learns from what he does. And if he's been in the top 3 and has not made that win yet, I'm sure he's learned from those previous times that he's been in the top 3. So we'll see what happens this year. The next three next-gen Daytona 500s have averaged 43 lead changes. That's the most since we ended the tandem drafting era. I enjoyed the tandem drafting, but 43 lead changes with the next-gen car, that's pretty amazing.
And that's where I've talked about all along, the competitiveness of it. Some of it obviously is just the way they race. And it used to be that and I know again, some fans weren't happy with it. NASCAR heard them and made the change of the stage points and brake. But the fact that once you get up to 3 lines, the back and forth with that can lead to some, I don't want to say blown up or over exaggerated stats, because they are only taken at when it comes to the start finish line. I just think in general, we have seen an increase in competitiveness of all the teams, especially when it comes to the super speedways.
Yes, I would agree with that statement. Okay, Chase Elliott with 9 Daytona 500 starts. He wants to become the 6th driver to win the Clash and the Daytona 500 in the same season. If he's able to do that, you've got Bobby Allison, who did it in 82. It was Bill Elliott in 1987, Dale Jarrett in 96, and again in 2000. Jeff Gordon did it in 1997, and Hamlin in 2016. Can he do it, Jay?
Most certainly, I do think he can, and I think I think they need to start breaking some of these stats into a new category, because the Clash used to be held at Daytona. That was back when we had 2 full weeks of speed weeks. You had the Clash, dual practice, all at Daytona. So to me, in my opinion, anybody that does it now, I think should be separated and identified as a little bit tougher, because for the past several years, our Clash has been at a short track. To then go from a short track to the super speedway, you're talking 2 different styles and whatnot. I think is a harder accomplishment. If you got a good speedway car at Daytona, we've talked about that. Dale Earnhardt would win everything at Daytona but the 500, because he always had the right car and top speed. So I think it's a little bit harder to do it in this day and age. I think it'd be great for Chase Elliott to be one to accomplish that.
Well, if he is able to accomplish that, it shows that he's good on the short tracks and the super speedways. The only other type of track is the intermediates then. So, yeah, I think that would be a good omen for Chase Elliott if he's able to do it. Okay, did you know that 50% of the laps raced at Daytona in the next-gen car have been led 50%, 57% of the laps raced at Daytona in the next-gen car have been led by Ford drivers?
I wouldn't have had the percentage necessarily right, but I definitely would have had the manufacturer. We mentioned that of when it comes to racing, they may, and this is one where I think Ford overall has it all that they need right in the middle. We talked about Chevrolet being fast in one single car pole qualifying, maybe not doing so good in the race. Toyota doesn't necessarily have the outright speed, but races well. I think Ford covers both ends. They qualify well as race well. And then they are one that, talking about this racing together as a manufacturer, which again, for fans, don't get uptight about this race manipulation. That is not race manipulation. But they're really the ones that organized as a manufacturer and said, hey, until the last 5 laps or the last 2 or 3 laps, let's work together as a manufacturer and make sure a manufacturer car wins. So Ford wins. When it comes down to it, we know that it's going to be individual. We've seen it. They say even wreck your grandmother or whatever to win a race. We've definitely seen that when it comes down to it. But I think Ford is really the one that perpetuated that of, hey, we're going to work together as a manufacturer and then as a team of Penske versus maybe Front Row. And then, like I said, it always comes down to individual of, hey, I want me.
Yes, indeed. Now, occasionally drivers, something will happen to their car during practice or during qualifying or whatever, and they have to go to a backup car. Well, there's been a few drivers that have actually won in their backup car. In 1969, it was Leroy Yarborough who did that. In 83, it was Cale Yarborough. In 92, Davey Allison. Matt Kenseth did it in 2009, Austin Dillon in 2018, and William Byron did it just last year. So it doesn't necessarily mean that you can't win the race if you have to go to your backup car.
This one, too, I thought the numbers would have been a little bit higher because we've seen that, especially when we talk about there being 2 weeks of practice and whatnot down there at Daytona a few years back, that there would have been more as far as having gone to a backup car. And when they interviewed William Byron, that was part of why he said he didn't want to start out like he did last year. So he did his 2 laps, made sure the car was running and wanted to get off the track. So he didn't. And one of the broadcasters said that, be like, hey, by the way, you won after going to a backup car last year. No, maybe it's not such a bad thing.
That's true. Of 66 Daytona 500s, 13 have ended with a last lap pass. We kind of talked about that. That's 20%. 4 of the last 9 Daytona 500s, 4 of the last 9 have ended with that last lap pass. That speaks to the next gen car as well.
Exactly. I think back in the day when you're talking about the last lap pass, there were only 5 cars maybe that really had the power and were up there battling, whereas now you have the top 20 to 25, even the entire pack of 30 that are at least can win it because they're running. Back in the day, you won races by X number of laps, not X number of seconds or milliseconds, but X number of laps. So as we get further with this next gen car, that's part of and I know some fans are not as interested in that. I'm not one of them. I like it. I like seeing all these cars running at the end, whereas back in the day, it was a matter of endurance. Could your car last? So I see the value of it. We talk about, we still have the Coca-Cola 600, but we don't see the wear and tear cars dropping out due to mechanical issues like we used to. True. There's good and bad to it. I mean, like I said, I kind of like that. But I also like that of knowing at the end, you still have a shot. You may be 20th or whatever, but you're still on the lead lap. You still got a shot.
You still have a shot. Now, 2 of the last 7 races have ended under caution, but 5 of the last 7 Daytona 500s have ended in an overtime finish. Your thoughts about that? Do we like the overtimes or not?
Yes and no. I mean, I like the excitement of it, but I also know that once you have one, or there's that late race one that's going to set up the overtime, it becomes I don't even know if I'd call it a controlled demo derby. It can get real ugly. And I'm trying to think what race. I think it was Nashville where they talked about having 5 restarts. I was kind of on that edge of, hey, do we need to put a limit on it when they talk about unlimited restarts for a green, white, checkered finish? Yeah, that one got a little hectic.
It did. Okay, now since 2014, 5 times the drivers missed the playoffs by 7 or fewer points. Points are awarded in the duel, and the fastest lap in the Daytona 500 will receive an additional point. So, thoughts about that?
Yeah, that's a change this year with Xfinity, I believe, is the sponsor behind that. I'm in favor of it. I know they don't like to do a lot of things where fans can't even keep up and know where points are being earned. But I'm kind of in favor of this. I know there was talk about that of leading the most laps. It used to be if you led a lap and then led the most laps. Well, they went away from that. And then when they brought in the stage points, and I think that was a good addition. So you see that hard racing in the middle of a race during those breaks. Mm-hmm. I think little things like this, I think I'm okay with recognizing some things, especially having that fast lap throughout a race, maybe leading the most laps. I'm okay. I was okay with that anyway. But I think there's little things like that of, hey, you got to be on your game. There will be no riding in the back like we were talking about because there is points up there to get. And if you're missing the playoffs by 1 or 2 points, it don't take you long to say, hey, I could have done this if I'd have done that here and there. So I like it because, like I said, especially with how tight tight the points are and moving on in rounds, it's going to
Yes.
have them up on the wheel at all times. So the more I talked about it right there, the more in favor of it I am, because I think it does provide where hard-nosed racing all the way through. There's no riding and waiting.
We talked about one of the more exciting playoffs that we watched with the tiebreaker between Tony Stewart and Carl Edwards. That was a virtual tie between the drivers, and the tiebreaker was Tony Stewart, who won 5 races during the playoffs. So every point makes a huge difference when you're talking about these playoff races, because you never know when it's going to, that 1 point can be all the difference in the world. And I know that that's something that I'm sure Carl Edwards looked back on. And as he reviewed his season, he probably saw lost opportunities where he could have picked up an extra point or two and let that slip by him. So I think this is a good thing. I think this is a good thing that keeps everybody competing for every point. And that's what we want as race fans. We want to see these drivers competing for those points.
Yeah, that's one of those, Sharon. As I said, the more, I heard when they announced it, I was like, okay, that's new. Yeah, that'll be interesting. The more I think about it, the more excited I am, because you're right, especially when we look at some of these points battles. I mean, and that's what caused the race manipulation we were talking about earlier at Martinsville. It was 1 point needed, one position. They wanted somebody to give them a position, or they were blocking. Okay, now you get to earn it yourself. And I'm much more in favor of that than a manipulation of somebody trying to help you get it. You can go out and get it yourself.
Absolutely. This puts it into the driver's hands. You have it within your reach to get those extra points that are available. And I think it just makes it that much more competitive all season long. So I think it's a good thing. Okay. Team Penske won at least one race on a drafting track each of the 11 seasons, the longest ever streak by a team. So does that favor Joey Logano?
That's one I would not have known until we were reading these notes. Interesting. I know there's I know Atlanta's considered a drafting style track, so 5 or 6 per year, but that's still impressive for any team. We talked about some of the records Hendrick had, this one by Penske, and I do think kind of favoring Fords as we go through more of these notes. I think I am kind of favoring a Ford here for the Daytona 500.
Well, we'll see. Like you said, Joey has won the Daytona 500, I'm pretty sure. But it's going to be interesting to see if he can win the championship and the Daytona 500. Now, 5 different drivers have won the Daytona 500 in the last 5 years. So in the last 5 years, we've seen a different winner every year. So Denny Hamlin won it in 19, Michael McDowell in 21, Austin Cindric in 22, Ricky Stenhouse in 23, and William Byron in 24. So will we see another different driver in 25?
I would say yes, that kind of favors it. And I'll use the next line to back that up, as Byron looks to become just the 5th different driver ever to win back-to-back Daytona 500s. That would put him on a list with Richard Petty, who did it in 73 and 74, Yarbrough in 83 and 84, Cale Yarbrough in 83 and 84, Sterling Marlin in 94 and 95, and Denny Hamlin in 2019 and 20. And I say that if it's really tough because, as we've mentioned, the competitiveness of the field, so many factors that can just work against you, not necessarily take you out of a race, just you're in the wrong line. That line bogs down. Somebody in front of you, bobbles, and you got to check up. It'd be really tough. So, it'd be cool to see anybody do history with William Byron, but I'd have to go with we get a 6 different winner in 6 years. That's the odds-on favorite.
That's true. Okay, I know you agree with me on this. We're both looking forward to watching the former Supercars champion, Shane Van Gisbergen from New Zealand, is going to be competing in his first full-time season in the NASCAR Cup Series season. What is your outlook for Shane Van Gisbergen this year?
I am super excited to see him come in and win at the Cup Series level in his first start at the Chicago Street Race. Wasn't all that surprising. It was right up his alley. Talk about being a very great road course racer, and the supercars kind of compare to this Cup Series next gen car from what they say weight wise. Now, obviously, where you sit in the car was a little bit different, so there were still some things. To watch him last year in the Xfinity Series, obviously did good on road courses. We expected that. I thought he did very solid, and I'll say top 10 to 15 solid
Yes.
in all the races throughout the year. He had some rough ones, no doubt. But even then, starting, and again, it doesn't necessarily equate to your season, but with the Clash on a short track, he was 10th, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. So to see that, I think with the progression we've already seen, especially if he gets a win on a road course, getting into the playoffs, I don't think is outside the realm of possibilities.
I don't think it is either. And you know what? I am not going to be surprised if he wins on a track that's not a road course. He has been competitive, and he's another one of these drivers that learns very quickly. And I think he learns from the mistakes that he's made. So I think that we might see a win by Shane Van Gisbergen. That's going to be my prediction on a track that's not a road course. Maybe he'll win on a road course, but I'm not going to be surprised if he wins on a non-road course track because I think he's that quick of a learner and that good of a driver.
Well, and one of the things, especially I think Martinsville is one they compare to of if you have road coursing racing skills, that it correlates a little bit better and quicker to the short track. So Martinsville, maybe Bristol, that you see that. Phoenix, where the championship race is, because you can run multiple lanes that aren't even on the track, go down to that apron, kind of plays into that. So that could be a factor if you were to make it to that championship four. I know that's a wild stretch. We just talked about how hard it is to get into the final four.
But not out of the realm of possibility, I think.
No, certainly not.
Okay, now the four-time Indy 500 champion and three-time Rolex 24 winner, Elio Castroneves, will compete in Saturday's ARCA Menard Series race. I'm excited about that, Jay. He's going to ride the Dente 200 with Pinnacle Race Group before switching gears to head up Trackhouse Racing's Project 91 entry for Sunday's Great American Race. That's the fifth time the number 91 raced for Trackhouse, and the first time not on a road course. So we get to see Elio race in both the ARCA Menard Series race as well as the Daytona 500 this year. I think that's exciting.
Well, I'm going to tie in this next bullet too of Trackhouse Racing. They're going to have 4 entries in the Daytona 500 from 4 countries. This is the first time in series history a team has had 4 drivers from 4 different countries. We got New Zealand with Shane Van Gisbergen, Mexico with Daniel Suarez, the United States with, who is it? Ross Chastain, and then Brazil with Elio Castroneves. So again, that 4 countries in the 2025 Daytona 500 ties the record for the most set back in 2010. And this goes back to not just crossover, but international. When we're talking about NASCAR's popularity and whatnot, I think this is huge for NASCAR as a sport, motorsports, of getting that international. I know in some of the other series, the ARCA Menard Series West, we talk about the Canadian drivers. We've seen several Mexican and drawing a blank on the name, the Japanese driver. There we go. Exactly. Appreciate it, Sharon. So I like that. And yeah, I think all of those kind of tie together. I think it's huge. I think Justin Marks, being one, he said he was going to change the way this game was played when he became an owner. And he's doing it in mega ways.
Let me just say, I love Justin Marks. I think he is an out-of-the-box thinker. I love some of the things he's been doing over at Trackhouse Racing. And I think it's been good for this sport. And Brazil, we talked about it in our last video. Brazil is one of those countries that they're talking about maybe having a race in Brazil at some point. So that's kind of exciting. And I wouldn't be at all surprised if Elio doesn't race in a race in Brazil with NASCAR. So with Trackhouse Racing. So I think that's great. Okay. It's an impressive lineup of drivers that are looking to attempt to qualify for the Daytona 500, including we've got the 7-time champ, Jimmy Johnson. We've got the 2017 Cup Series champion, Martin Truex Jr., and last year's Xfinity Series champion, Justin Allgaier. Who's going to have the best finish there?
Wow, that's a tough one. Two of those are Junior Motorsports and Tricon Garage as organizations. They're both making their Cup Series debut here in this Daytona 500. Off the top of my head, I would have said Justin Allgaier with Junior Motorsports, just based on their history and their super speedway program, having Dale Earnhardt Jr. to lean on. But I think Martin Truex
and car too.
Yeah, that one too. And I know you mentioned Martin Truex never having the 500 win. I think he's had some good runs. However, Toyotas just don't seem to come out. I don't know. Yeah, and I mean, I hate to say it, but Jimmy Johnson's at the bottom of the list. I know that Legacy Motorsports are going through yet another change now with ownership, but I think they're still getting their feet under them. Jimmy Johnson, one of those drivers, is having to learn how to drive this next gen car. So I mean, Justin Allgaier winning it in Junior Motorsports, in Dale Jr.'s first run as far as a car owner, Junior Motorsports at the Cup level, I think would be a huge storyline. And it's possible, but if I had to pick from one of them three, I'd have to give it to Allgaier, Truex second, and then Jimmy Johnson.
Yeah, from an emotional side, I'm hoping for Martin Truex Jr.
Right.
So let me just say something here, though, about Jimmy Johnson. I know some people have called for Jimmy Johnson to get out of the car, and I am going to defend Jimmy Johnson Racing in this next gen car. His job as an owner is to help his organization be more competitive on the track. I think it's good that he's getting behind the wheel of the next gen car so that he has an understanding of what the challenges are with that car and how he can help his drivers be more competitive. And I think it's good that he's able to do that. Not all team owners are able to get behind the wheel of the car to be able to give that feedback. And is it necessary for a team owner to necessarily be behind the wheel of the car to be successful? No, not necessarily. But I think in this case, I think it gives him a perspective that I think will help him as a team owner. So I'm going to defend Jimmy Johnson being behind the wheel of the car. What are your thoughts on that, Jay? Because some people are calling for him to kind of get out of the car.
No, I was going to applaud you there. You said it all very well. First off, if a driver is choosing to be out there and race and has the opportunity, whatever your thoughts on it are, that's their choice. He still enjoys it. I thought he left while he was still in kind of his prime. So, again, I understand he's having a tough time adapting, and he'll admit it, adapting to this next gen car. But it's not, as you said, it's not just about him and his ego. He is trying to help that team do better. And when the driver says, hey, the car's doing this, if he can't relate to it or understand it, how is he going to help? So I think it is huge from the organization standpoint, like you mentioned. So, yeah, I got no problem with it. It's one of those of, do I think it's tarnishing his legacy?
No,
maybe a little bit. I do, because people want to look at the stat line. I understand that. He's not running up front and winning championships, so thus it kind of does take away from that.
He's not doing it to win a championship.
And that's where, but you got to be able to understand that. Whereas I don't think a lot of fans really do.
He's doing it maybe to help his driver win a championship at some point.
Right. And that's what I think so.
Championship himself.
Yeah, no, I definitely think so. And like I said, even some that felt like he didn't do what he thought he could in IndyCar. He wanted to do it, and he ran, and I don't feel he embarrassed himself by any means. You want to see a driver embarrass themselves, put me in any kind of race car, and I'll knock down a wall or two. And Not like Ross Chastain did either.
Well,
That was with a purpose. Mine wouldn't be with a purpose.
I probably wouldn't be a good race car driver now, but I tell you what, I've always said if I'm reincarnated, I want to come back as a race car driver. I want to get my chance.
And Sharon, I got to thank you a few years back when you had me set it up where I could go over to Atlanta and be part of that program of the driving school over there and do a story on that. And that was, I want to say we did 160 miles. I don't know if I have what I need to be a race car driver as far as the intestinal fortitude, as they like to say. I certainly don't believe I could do IndyCar at 220. That just blows my mind. And I think about that just driving a personal vehicle. I know what I'm due in a personal vehicle, and I'm pretty bold in that. But, taking it on a track in a cup car, yeah, that was another step. And IndyCar 220, yeah, I don't know if I could do that.
Yeah. I'd love to have a chance. Okay, let's talk about Junior Motorsports and Tricon Garage. They're both attempting to make their first Cup Series debut in the Daytona 500 this season. So 2 new teams racing in the Daytona 500. Where's your bet there?
Well, like I said, that ties into Truex and Martin Truex Jr. and Justin Allgaier. Yep. Big thing I want to tell fans, don't get the horse in front of the cart in front of the horse here, especially when it comes to Junior Motorsports. They are not moving up to go full-time racing. This deal for this race and this partnership came along. Tricon Garage. Originally, the plan was for Martin Truex to race with 2311 and Denny Hamlin and Michael Jordan. We got an issue with the lawsuit. We got an issue whether they're a charter team. They added a team with Riley Herbst. So there again, Tricon stepped up and said, okay, we'll take it on. It's partnership with them and Joe Gibbs Racing. Don't look to be like, hey, where's Tricon Garage next week or next season? It's a one-spot deal. If it builds to something, so be it. But don't start, hounding on Junior Motorsports especially. From the minute it was announced, I heard callers calling Sirius XM radio. Oh, Junior Motorsports is going full-time Cup race. No, they're not. They did this one race. Even Kelly Earnhardt said they don't know for sure that they'll even do another race throughout the entire season, let alone go full-time. So if it happens, let it develop. Don't get spun up on something that isn't going to happen or isn't going to happen in the near future.
I 100% agree. So we'll see what does happen. And I applaud them for making their debut here at the Daytona 500. And I hope we see more of them, throughout the year. So we'll see what happens there. Okay, Jay, there's a few other things that I guess we could touch on here. Significant events at the Daytona 500. There's quite a few that date back to 1947 all the way up to 2022. There's also historical Daytona International Speedway information and the latest storylines. Well, let's talk about that. This year's event marks the 10th consecutive sellout at the Daytona 500. What fans can expect to see as far as dignitaries at the race this year?
All right, let me see where we got down there. I don't think I was that far down.
All the way to the
historical. There we go. All right, so we got blockbuster movie star and lead in the Marvel's upcoming film Captain America: Brave New World. You have Anthony Mackie. He'll serve as the Grand Marshal and give that command ahead of the Daytona 500.
And Anthony Mackie was also in the Super Bowl last week. So he's really making his rounds this year.
All right. And great job. I'll give a shout out to that with Fox. I know obviously they're carrying the Super Bowl and the Daytona 500. So
yes.
The advertising they did with that.
Yes, yes.
Might have some favoritism here, but we got Grammy award-winning superstar and Trackhouse Racing co-owner Pitbull. He's going to perform the pre-race show ahead of the Daytona 500. And then, what's that?
I said that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I know. I was just
Flash perform So we know he's a good performer.
I always like listening to him, so most certainly. Alan Richardson will add some muscle as the honorary pace car driver for the Daytona 500. The actor and producer is going to lead the field to green for the 67th running of the Great American Race. And I know this went through a little bit of a lull, but the United States Air Force Thunderbirds, they're going to return for the 15th consecutive year and 16th overall to perform the flyover above that completely sold out crowd ahead of Sunday's Daytona 500.
And I've been there and seen those guys. It gives you goosebumps to watch those guys fly over. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, that's not showing any favoritism there. I think anybody that's seen the Thunderbirds will tell you how good they are and what a show it is.
They are.
What do we got here? The last is the Daytona International Speedway 50-50 raffle is officially live, and it's giving fans the chance to win big with a guaranteed minimum jackpot of $100,000. Half of the proceeds are going to go to support veterans and first responders through VetTix, which is a nonprofit organization, provides essential community reintegration opportunities, family bonding experiences, and improve the overall quality of life to over 21 million military and veterans. The jackpot draw will take place on February 16th. But tickets are available, and you can get them at Daytona5050.com. With the nonprofit organization VetTix, I just wanted to speak to that personally. When it talks about reintegration opportunities and family bonding experiences, when a military member is gone for 6 months, a year, sometimes up to 2 years, normally 2 years is the top, but it can be longer. The coming back into the family life, the household, the way things are run in their household can be different, but also then within the community. I kind of compare it to you had a job and you might lose it, or you're coming back to try and get back into it. Takes a lot of support, not just from the family, but as it mentions, the community. So I just wanted to give a big shout out there to NASCAR and the Daytona 500 at 50-50, as well as VetTix being a part of that.
Yes, indeed. It's so worthwhile. And if you can contribute by getting an opportunity to get that minimum jackpot of $100,000, I think it is money well invested, even if you don't win. So definitely, if you can, head on over to Daytona5050.com and get some tickets for your chance at that $100,000 and support our veterans.
All right. Well, we covered quite a bit again, Sharon.
We did. Is there anything in the historical data for Daytona or the other significant events at Daytona International Speedway that kind of stand out to you? There's so many. Yeah, I don't want to go over all of them right now, but maybe pick out one or two that kind of stand out for you, Jay.
Well, the biggest one of, and I know there aren't a whole lot of them when we talk about brothers, but Darrell and Michael Waltrip being the only pair of brothers to win the Daytona 500 was certainly an event. And they had an event back in July 12th of 2010, where they took the backhoe to the Turn 1 banking of Daytona International Speedway. That was the ceremonial groundbreaking of the historic repaving of the iconic high banks. But just thinking about the history of seeing brothers win the Daytona 500, I talk about championships, you're talking about the Labanis, but the 500, you got to talk about the Waltrips.
Yes, yes, indeed. And if you haven't been to Daytona to see exactly what we're talking about when we talk about the high banks, they're pretty steep. I've been there, even on the front stretch. You're talking about a steep high banks there. So I would really encourage people to get out there. What about in the next section here? Anything that stands out to you there?
No, what I look forward to is what we're writing in history now. We've talked about a couple different things. Can we get a back-to-back winner in William Byron? Do we get a 6 different winner in 6 years? So I kind of looking, not that I don't like looking back at history, but I'm looking at what history we're writing right now.
That is the truth. All right, getting to that then. Usually we like to give what our picks are at the end. Who's your let's say your top pick and your dark horse?
You want to know what? And I don't even know where you'd classify him, Sharon, because he has shown some good runs. Depending on your opinion, he could fall into both. Bubba Wallace, he was second quick in practice with that group of Toyotas that was drafting. I think Bubba Wallace kind of falls under that dark horse, but not really. So, sorry, I thought I had an earthquake. Dog was behind me. Bubba Wallace is going to be my pick. And like I said, he might even fall under the dark horse category. The other one of talking about, I'd say a dark horse, running eighth quick. I like him. You know that, Sharon. I'm going to go with Noah Gregson as my dark horse then.
Okay. I'm going to go for Joey Logano, putting himself on an elite list of drivers who won the championship and then went on to win the Daytona 500. So I'm going to pick Joey Logano to win it this year. But my dark horse is going to be Martin Truex Jr. I know he's never won there before, but I would love to see him get that victory. And I think it would be really fitting for him to be recognized by his peers with that Daytona 500 win after 21 tries. So from that emotional standpoint, I really think it would be an iconic win for Martin Truex Jr. to get that win. Same with Kyle Busch. It would be good to see him get it as well. But my vote goes to Martin Truex.
I was just thinking of that as you said that. I was like, well, if I remember correctly, earlier in the show, I was all about Kyle Busch. You talk about that 20th try and being one of those drivers that's done everything in NASCAR, having won championships, coming off that rough year of not winning to come back with that. The storyline that would be if Kyle Busch were to win. So, yeah, that'd be another good one, especially as far as a storyline for NASCAR.
Yes, I think it would be a great story. It would also be a great story if Shane Van Gisbergen were to pop in there and get that win for Trackhouse Racing.
Well, and that's where I said, it's tough to say a dark horse at a super speedway race. Like you said, Truex getting that one start in Tricon Garage, it kind of is, but it certainly is possible. So it's not like it's a total out of the blue scenario. And that would be the same with Shane Van Gisbergen. You certainly would be as a rookie. It's been a while since we've seen that. A rookie win the 500. I believe it was back in 2022 with Austin Cindric. So that's always a good story too. And we've seen it can be done by a rookie.
I think so. But I think your pick of Bubba Wallace is a good pick as well. Bubba Wallace has been a perennial contender when it comes to super speedways. And who knows? This might be his year.
Definitely interested. And again, it may not be my driver, but I'm so looking forward to now getting into race season. The Daytona 500, as I mentioned, kind of start NASCAR with the Super Bowl of racing. This is a big one in itself. Plus, it starts the season. So,
well, I think we've given fans a lot to think about, a lot to look for that might make it a little more interesting for them when they watch the Daytona 500 this year. I will say I will be coming out a little bit later. I'm also putting together some videos that will preview the ARCA race. I'm also going to do a preview for the Truck Series race and a preview for the Xfinity Series race. Now, I'm going to ask you, Jay, do you want to join me for those, or do you how do you feel about that?
Well, I know schedule-wise, we have a little more flexibility now, being that we can do these on our time and not a scheduled time. So if you're doing any of them on Friday, mid-morning to afternoon, I certainly would love to jump in, but I know that you got your schedule as well. So we'll have to see. But yeah, if Friday, if you're doing any of them Friday, let me know and I'll see if I'm available, and certainly love jumping on here with you, Sharon.
Okay, I love it too. I'm looking forward to the duels tomorrow as well. And we kind of gave you some heads up about what to look for in the duels as well. I probably am going to go ahead and do the ARCA preview myself. I think I'll get those notes sometime tomorrow, and I can sit down and do that preview. But I could certainly Maybe I'll do the ARCA and then the truck, and I'll save the Xfinity series. How does that sound to you?
All right. Certainly try and be, like I said, about 10:30, 11 o'clock into the afternoon, depending on what you got. And I would love to do the Xfinity. Right there, talking to Xfinity already, got me excited. Rookie of the Year for the Xfinity series.
It's going to be exciting.
Man, I think there's 9 of them.
Yes, it's going to be amazing. So yeah, I'm looking forward to talking to you about that. If I can save one of them for you, as a matter of fact, I think ARCA doesn't race until Saturday, if I remember correctly. If they don't race until Saturday, let me look here.
Yeah, I believe you're right. I think they run before the Xfinities. Yeah, they run before the Xfinity on Saturday.
So I'll tell you what, I will do the truck series since that's going to be on Friday. I'll go ahead and do that on Thursday, but I'll save the ARCA and the Xfinity series for you and I to do on Friday. But it'll be 2 separate videos.
All right, sounds good.
Okay, so watch for those to be upcoming. We did do a review of the Bowman Gray race, the Clash at Bowman Gray, and that is already up at Bamper Racing Radio on YouTube. So if you haven't seen that yet, it's our first attempt, so keep that in mind. Hopefully we'll get better as we go throughout the season. We know that we have a learning curve here, so bear with us as we go through that learning curve. But we've got our baseline, let's put it that way, and it can only get better from there. So I've enjoyed doing the preview of the Cup Series race with you, Jay, and I look forward to talking to you again on Friday, and we'll be in touch to set a time for us to put that all together.
All right, look forward to it. And for the fans listening, make sure you share and subscribe. I know Sharon had the little banner up earlier, and something I know I'll speak for Sharon. Let us know what we can do to improve, because this is new to us. Sharon, I think, has done an outstanding job of learning how to work the system. I know we had a couple of glitches even getting started today, but we are trying to learn and do better. So let us know what we can do differently, better, what your input is. Again, as it's talked about with just in general, be respectful of that. But if it's criticism, Sharon and I are strong-willed people. We can take it.
Yeah, as long as it's constructive feedback that we can use to help us be better, I'm all for that. If it gets personal, that's where I kind of draw the line. So, but we do encourage your comments and look forward to hearing from you as far as who are your picks for the Daytona 500 win and the duels, and who's going to be on the front row. If you want to leave that in the comment sections for us, that would be fantastic. And we'll look forward to kind of building a community here. And I know we're off to a little bit of a slow start. That's to be expected. But we hope you'll share with others that we are here on YouTube, and kind of encourage others to join us. We hope to create a very friendly environment, and that's safe for kids as well as adults, and kind of keep things going throughout this season. So if you can help us with that, we certainly appreciate your efforts. Thank you.
All right, and we'll talk to you on Friday, and look forward to the weekend of racing.
I am right there with you, Jay. Take care, and we'll look forward to talking to you soon.